From 1998 to 2001, I lived in a small craftsman-style home in the Laurel Mountains, not too far from Frank Lloyd Wright's Fallingwater. The home had a twin next door that was built at the same time. By the time we bought our place, the one next door had been remodeled and expanded so extensively that it was unrecognizable. They'd added a second story and what looked like a three-car garage. The property originally belonged to two brothers back in the 1920s. They'd inherited the land from their father and decided to build matching houses side by side. The brother whose house ended up getting the makeover had two sons who made good money in Pittsburgh and wanted to update their father's place. But here's the fishy part. Our neighbor told us the two boys were werewolves. I didn't know this until my husband told me later on, after we had both experienced some strange things. When he told my husband about this, he invited him in for a tour of his home. During the tour, he pulled back the carpet to show my husband a stone pentagram built into the slate of the foyer floor. My husband said it was maybe 3 feet across, inlaid with darker stones, clearly intentional. The neighbor claimed the sons had it put in during the renovations. He seemed dead serious about it. A month or so passed, and we got a really sweet rescue dog, a Sheltie. She was perfectly friendly, normal, and protective over my 7-year-old daughter. But over the following months, she started doing strange things. Sometimes I'd get up in the middle of the night to find her growling down the stairs at something. That low, rumbling growl she only did when she was genuinely threatened. There was never anything there that I could see. She'd also refuse to go into certain rooms, sometimes just plant her feet and pull back on the leash. During the day, she would stand between me and the door to the dining room and growl for 10 or 15 minutes straight, just staring at that doorway like something was there. Then she began to get unpredictable. She would wet on the carpet in the same corner of the living room. And then one afternoon, completely out of nowhere, she bit me. Not hard enough to need stitches, but enough to break the skin. By that point, I was pregnant and scared to have a biting dog around a baby, so I took her to the ASPCA. I felt terrible about it, but I didn't know what else to do. During my pregnancy, I started sleeping in another room away from my husband. He snored like a freight train. Then one night, I woke to something crawling up from the foot end of the bed over my feet and legs. I couldn't see anything and was so terrified that I couldn't even scream. I could feel the weight of it, the pressure moving up the blanket like hands and knees pressing down. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. I was able to put a hand up, grabbed the headboard, and I tried to pull myself up and away from whatever it was. This was an old rickety double bed, and I slammed it against the wall repeatedly. The metal frame was banging so loud it echoed through the whole house. With that noise, I was finally able to scream, and whatever was on my legs disappeared, just gone. I ran to the hall to find my husband running to meet me. He asked me what happened, and I didn't know what to say. I just told him I had a nightmare. That winter, a few months after the baby was born, I was sleeping in that room with the baby in his crib next to the bed. My mother was visiting, and we had all been enjoying an evening in front of the fireplace. The whole house was warm and toasty when we went to bed around midnight. Then, at about 2 a.m., I woke to the baby screaming like I'd never heard before. When I tried to get up, I was so ice cold I could barely move. The air in that room was like a freezer. My mom and husband heard the baby screaming and came running in. My husband said, "Why the hell is it so cold in here?" The door had been open the whole time. My mom took the baby out and my husband helped me to the hallway. Beyond the open door, the hallway and rest of the house were still warm. It made no sense. There was this invisible line right at the doorway where the temperature just dropped. Thank God we ended up moving out the following summer. But before we did, my husband talked to the neighbor about our experiences, and the guy just nodded, like he'd been waiting for this. He said, "Oh yeah, The two boys and their father all passed away in the house back in the 30s under tragic circumstances. People say their ghosts still roam both properties. My husband came home white as a sheet. We never told our daughter any of this until she was much older. Sometimes I still think about that place, but I'm just glad we got out when we did. My parents split up when I was about 10 years old, and after that, I lived with my mom. My mom always loved horses, and I grew up around them too. When my parents separated, my mom decided to start our own horse stable. The ranch my mom found was about 10 kilometers from anything, just a few scattered neighbors, and even further from actual towns. On one hand, I was genuinely excited about the new place and getting to be around horses all the time. But on the other hand, I wasn't thrilled about being stuck in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dense forests with barely anyone around. I lived there for about 5 years without my own car, so I was completely dependent on someone giving me a ride. The thing that really got to me was being alone outside. Even though I was totally fine being around the horses or riding them through the forest, whenever I had to walk around by myself, I'd get this really uneasy feeling. I always blamed it on myself, thinking I was just being weak or paranoid. During the day, I was fine, but at night, I'd literally run from one place to another with my heart pounding like crazy. It wasn't that I was scared of the dark specifically, it was more like this deep, gut-level fear that I couldn't really explain. Just pure instinct telling me something was wrong. The absolute worst part was waiting for the school bus in the mornings. In Finland, it's dark for most of the year, so during winter, I'd have to stand out there by myself at the edge of our property in complete darkness.
My stop was maybe 50 meters from the house, but it felt like miles. I'd keep looking over my shoulder the whole time. Even the house didn't feel safe to me. It was this big old ranch house with creaky floors and too many rooms. Most of the time, it was just me and my mom living there, but she was constantly busy outside taking care of the horses, so I spent hours alone in that huge house, and there were certain parts I just refused to go into. The house had a really weird layout. It was only one story, stretched out in this long, narrow way, except for one room that had a loft space above it. There was this long hallway that ran through the entire building, connecting all the rooms. The floorboards would creak with every step. The bathroom was all the way at the far end, so there was no avoiding it.
I started feeling like something was watching me all the time. It got so bad that I actually switched bedrooms. My old room had windows right at ground level. Anything could look in. My new room had a window placed really high up on the wall, so high that nothing shorter than a person could see through it, and that made me feel safer. There was this period where I tried to be brave about it. I'd force myself to take walks on the roads near our property, trying to prove to myself that there was nothing out there to be afraid of. But then a couple of things happened that made me stop. First, I almost got ran over by a deer that came out of nowhere. Then there was this other time that really freaked me out. I was on one of my walks when suddenly every instinct in my body just screamed at me to run. I just felt this overwhelming urge to get the hell out of there, so I just ran. I sprinted all the way home without stopping. I moved away when I was 16, and honestly, even though I loved being around the horses, it felt like this huge weight lifted off my shoulders. I could finally walk around without that constant fear hanging over me. After I left, my mom started telling me things she'd kept from me the whole time I lived there. She admitted she hadn't said anything before because she knew I would have completely freaked out. So she tells me that there had been wolves spotted around our area. This doesn't explain all my years of paranoia, but it sure as hell explains why I felt that primal urge to run on my last walks. And it gets worse. She said wolves had gotten to deer right around our property, in the field we could see from our windows, and my mom knew about this the whole time and didn't tell me. But that wasn't even the worst part. My mom casually mentioned that one morning she went out to feed the horses around 4 or 5 a.m. before heading to work. But the second she stepped outside, she knew something was wrong. We had motion sensor lights on the corner of the stable, positioned pretty far out. So every morning you had to walk a good few meters through complete darkness before you'd get close enough to trigger them. My mom usually walked out with our cats following her. They'd normally run ahead, excited for their morning routine. But that particular morning, the cats refused to go past the porch light, just sitting there at the edge of the lit area, staring into the darkness. But my mom is absolutely fearless, so she just shrugged it off and marched straight into the pitch-black darkness by herself. When the motion sensor light finally clicked on, she saw a wolf standing right there by the corner of the stable. The second the light came on, it took off running. But my mom had seen it clearly. She figured it was probably just checking out the area, looking for easy food. When she told me this, I felt sick to my stomach. I really hope those wolves only started showing up after I got my moped license and stopped having to wait for the school bus in the dark. Because the thought of standing out there alone at the edge of our property in complete darkness with wolves potentially watching me from the trees, that's nightmare fuel. I lived in that house for several years, constantly freaked out and on edge. And honestly, I haven't even shared all the creepy things that happened. There were other weird incidents and strange feelings I had, but these were the main ones that stuck with me. I'm a 23-year-old female, and I moved to Kentucky about a year ago to work my dream job. I work on a horse farm as a groom, raising baby horses that will go on to be racehorses. The farm I work on is made up of land that used to be several farms. There are many confirmed unmarked graves and a few marked graves scattered around the property. And given the hazards of the job of caring for half-ton prey animals, who knows how many former employees might be buried here too. Almost every barn in use has its own ghost stories, and my own experiences happened at one barn last winter. I had a barn partner, and our job was to check the horses out in the fields and feed them. We had one staying in the barn on limited turnout due to a foot injury. She was outside, and I was cleaning her stall while my partner was out in the fields. Her stall was the only one with bedding, a water bucket, and feed tub. All the others were empty brick-bottom stalls. While cleaning, I had in one earbud listening to music. At the other end of the barn, outside, I heard two men talking, like they were having a normal conversation. So at first, I thought maybe it was the bosses coming to check on the barn. I pulled out my earbud and walked down to look, and there wasn't anyone there or any trucks leaving. I even stepped outside to check but found nothing, and total silence. Slightly creeped out, I went back to work, turned my music up louder this time. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe sound carried weird from another barn, but we were pretty isolated out there, and I know what I heard. Later, I was working in the break room and I distinctly heard the sound of someone walking down the shed row, clicking the clasp of a lead rope. Click, click, click. That rhythmic sound every horse person knows when you're walking and absent-mindedly flicking the clip with your thumb. I looked to see if my partner returned, but I was still alone. Then I heard the sound of a feed tub being shook, that unmistakable metallic jangle. I grew even more creeped out. I actually called out hello like an idiot. Part of me wanted to leave right then, but I had a job to finish. After a while, I was sweeping up hay in the hay room. As I finished sweeping, I heard a horse rustling in its stall and snort, that deep, breathy sound they make. The stall next to the hay room was empty. I knew it was empty. I'd walked past it a dozen times that day, but I heard bedding being pawed at, that shuffling movement. I later told my partner what I'd heard, and she said she too had heard strange things around the barn and had learned to deal with it as part of the job. She didn't even seem surprised. Said the old-timers told her this barn used to have way more horses back in the day. As we talked, we both heard a woman laugh around the corner. Not a creepy laugh or anything, just a normal, light chuckle, like someone had heard a joke. We both froze and looked at each other. We were alone at the barn. We didn't even go check. What was the point? She just shrugged and said, "See what I mean? It seems like this barn is still running from a bygone time along with us living grooms. Like we're all just working the same shift, separated by decades or maybe a century. I still work there, and I still hear things. The horses don't seem bothered, so I figure whoever's there means no harm."